Hello guys, welcome to Redditor's Revenge. Here we post amazing revenge stories daily. And if you want more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel and stay tuned with us. Moving on to our today's first story. Financial advisors employed by a pretty major bank stole all the money of a wealthy old lady who was dying of Alzheimer's, and she didn't know anything until her lights were cut off. My brother was a pretty small-time lawyer and got the call to represent her. Every other big-time attorney in the area had either passed on the case or tried and failed to get anywhere. When you're up against a legal team that makes a collective $10,000 per hour, it's not easy. OFFS, maybe it wasn't $10,000 per hour to penny, give or take $1,000, and you get the point. And since banks always have mandatory arbitration clauses worked into their contracts, she couldn't sue or even do discovery. OFFS proper discovery then. Discovery as you and I know it, as it ought to be. Like, it was obvious what had happened, and the only people with access to the account were clearly implicated. But number one, it was hard to prove without any access to bank records. And number two, under arbitration, it wouldn't matter anyway. They could be criminally prosecuted, but the bank wouldn't have to pay back the money. Did I mention the bank had, at this point, frozen the lady's access to her own accounts due to fraud? So she couldn't even get her own bank statements. FINRA did not really apply in this case for many reasons that I never understood properly then and neither remember nor care about now. Anyway, my bro became pretty obsessed with avenging for this woman. By the time he got the case, she barely even knew what her own situation was most of the time. But her son just wanted to make the bank bend over, and my brother was all in. He managed to find an incredibly obscure technicality that nullified the arbitration clause and was able to force a major bank into the discovery process. That alone was a huge enough deal that the decision was written up in many legal newspapers and journals figure it out across the country. The technicality was that the bank failed to keep an original copy of the contract, so they couldn't prove there was an arbitration clause. It is apparently normal for them not to keep originals, but in this case, they didn't even keep reliable copies, and neither person who signed the contracts could be deposed under oath to determine whether the clause existed. So the judge just threw out the clause. The obscure part was that the copies were almost exact duplicates of the original, but a few words had been changed and the pages were renumbered, and he caught the differences and pointed out that they weren't true duplicates. It wasn't really a loophole in the law so much as a flaw in the bank's bookkeeping. After fighting and delaying discovery until the very last minute, the bank dumped 200+ boxes of documents on my brother the Friday, before the Monday discovery hearing. He had 72 hours to go through tens of thousands of pages of documents. Oh duck, is it really that unbelievable that a lawyer would try to keep a case moving along? Turns out he didn't need the continuance so many of you experts claim he would have. This attitude explains a lot about a lot of cases. He rented himself a hotel for the weekend so he'd have no disturbances, had a friend bring a dolly and hand-truck the boxes to the hotel room, and got to work. In one of the boxes was an email between a bank VP and the bank's chief lawyer discussing how there would never be a discovery process, so there was no need to destroy documents. That is future evidence, and also saying that they weren't worried about the little old lady's lawsuit since the bank had frozen her accounts so she wouldn't be able to pay her lawyer, and he was just a small-time country lawyer who would surely quit once he wasn't being paid. It wasn't like he worked for some huge firm that could just pay his bills while he worked. They also discussed how the lady would likely die of Alzheimer's before her accounts would be unfrozen once the fraud was proven to be false. Duck, no, it's not necessarily client privilege. Even I know that is not a magic wand you can wave and make everything disappear. It fell outside the parameters of privilege. Do you really think the bank would have settled if they had felt otherwise? They had my bro all wrong, of course. He was working all day on paying cases and then staying up half the night working on this one, sometimes without getting paid anything for months. We did the math later. He made about $2.75 per hour for his work over 7+ years. Anyway, these chuckleheads openly discussed several illegal acts in emails to each other and then failed to destroy the paperwork proving they had actually undertaken those acts, which, legally, they could have destroyed at the time, but they were so arrogant they thought they didn't have to. When my brother entered that into evidence Monday morning, they immediately motioned for a recess and offered to settle for, an undisclosed sum. He also won his client $13 million in a separate part of the lawsuit. One agent recently finished serving a long sentence in the same federal prison as Bernie Madoff. He got prison time for tax fraud and some combo of bank fraud, forgery, perjury to the feds, and I think filing false documents. I can't remember which of these he pleaded guilty to, but those were the Oregon accusations. This is why he couldn't be deposed in the arbitration clause part. He had already pleaded guilty to some of these charges and was indicted on others, so the judge deemed his word under oath to be unreliable. He also lost his home. The beach home he bought with the old lady's money had his financial broker license revoked and his wife left him. However, his kid did get a private college education paid for in cash with the lady's money, and he bought $200,000 worth of wine that was never recovered. Sadly, the lady did in fact die before the case was settled, so the money went to her son and to a large charitable trust that then elected my brother as the main trustee. So he gets to disperse the money he won in the settlement and see a lot of people benefit from his work. The funniest part of this revenge was that the apparent motive for the theft was not just that the agent wanted to be rich. He had accomplices, but he was the main mastermind. He specifically wanted to use the money to enhance his standing in the community. So actually, he donated a lot of the stolen money to charities so that he could be invited to huge galas, get philanthropic awards, etc. Now he is broke, unemployed, divorced, and disgraced, while my brother is going to galas and getting philanthropic awards with the money this guy helped pay for the sale of his houses, cars, etc. Pretty sweet. Now, here is the end of our first story, and I hope you guys are enjoying my content. So before moving to the next story, you guys can share your thought in the comments section about this scammy bank agent and the revenge OP's brother took on him. And let me know what your opinion about OP's brother and his work. Also hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned with us for more satisfying revenge stories.
Now, moving on to our second story. This happened a couple of years ago. I, 28F, was dating Max, 29M, for 5 years. We were full on together. We lived together, shared finances, had 2 dogs, etc., and my best friend Amy lived 10 minutes away, so we were always with each other. We were pretty much the 3 musketeers. One day I'm scrolling on Instagram and I see my boyfriend in the background of a picture posted to our local bar's page. He was supposed to be at work and I'd never been given a reason not to trust him, so I figured it was an older picture as we go there a couple of times a month. But when he got home he was wearing the same blue button-up and jeans. I had a horrible feeling in my stomach, but I didn't say anything. That night I went through his phone. Yeah, I know, but I don't care. We've always shared passwords and have never had an issue with using each other's phones. When I checked his messages I saw a chain with someone named Jack. We didn't know a Jack, so I read through them, and my heart just ducking breaks. I've known my best friend since we were in diapers, and I know how she texts. But I checked the number just to be sure, and yep, they were talking behind my back. Not just talking though, there were pictures and mentions of sexual acts that had happened. I spent the night crying and sending myself all of the screenshots and everything I could find. By morning, I realized that I can't just confront them, I need to prepare. So I set out to put money aside. I tell him our fridge is broken, so I'm using some of our savings to fix it. We need a plumber for this or a handyman for that. All lies, but I needed a reason to pull money out of the account we both had access to. It took me 2 months, but I was able to pull enough out to put in a deposit and pay a couple of months in advance on a new apartment that I found that was closer to work and pet-friendly. I was able to slowly move stuff there while he was at work. I told him I was doing some spring cleaning to clear out the clutter. In the meantime, I ducked with their heads. I'd mentioned things about each other that would cause drama, like telling Max that Amy talked about a cute guy from work, or telling Amy that Max mentioned marriage and kids with me. She's infertile due to a childhood illness. The day before I was leaving, I set my plan in motion. I knew where my best friend went for lunch most days of the week, so I watched and waited. When she arrived, I went in and pretended I didn't want to throttle her for breaking my trust and my heart. We sat down and chatted, and I slyly mentioned sex with Max. In their messages she told him that she didn't want him to sleep with me. She'd become quite possessive of my BF. I made comments about how sore I was because we did it rough just like I like it. How good he was at oral, you name it, I mentioned it. Her face got redder and redder and it was amazing to watch. I'd seen her react that way before, but I never realized why. She'd always insist on watching late-night movies with us or ask to sleep on our couch instead of going home, and being mad when I had to say no. I want to have privacy with my BF. I just thought she was lonely or a little clingy, but I never would have imagined she didn't want to leave because she wanted to make sure we weren't having intimacy. Later that day I go home and once again pretend that everything is normal. But I sit down on the couch with him and snuggle up to him while he watches TV. After about 20 minutes I straddle him and ask him how his day was, and blah blah blah. Then I bring up that I ran into Amy at lunch and you'll never guess who she was with. I told him how Amy was with Dave, her real-life coworker that has hung out with us multiple times, and how it's so cute that they're dating now. When I say he froze, I don't think he even breathed. He just sort of muttered, I didn't know she was seeing someone. So I tell him all about how I caught them kissing, and after Dave left to go back to work, Amy told me all about their amazing intimate life. And of course, I had to add in there that Dave was the first guy to give her a real pleasure, and how she's always had to fake it with guys before. I've never seen him look so dejected before. That night I asked that we do a phone-free night, which we do often so that we could be in our bubble. I could tell that he was a little hesitant, but he turned his phone off and put it in the basket we used for it. We watched a movie and cuddled on the couch, and he stayed as stiff as a board for the majority of it before he relaxed enough to fall asleep on the couch. Once he was out, I grabbed his work phone and sent out a contact list-wide email about how I may be in a bad mood for the next couple of weeks because my mistress gave me the clap. Then I changed the passcode on it and turned it off. I knew that he wouldn't turn it on until he got to his worksite, which was 40 minutes away. As soon as he was out the door, I immediately packed my bags, important papers, and the dogs and left. I also unscrewed most light bulbs, took the batteries out of the remote, took the router plug-in so he wouldn't have Wi-Fi, and cranked the AC up to 80 Fahrenheit. When I got to my new place, I sent her a text asking how my pee tasted and then blocked them both. Then I posted screenshots to my FB and let everyone know what horrible people they were. Now, here is the end of our today's video, and I hope you enjoyed this petty revenge OP took on her asshole cheating boyfriend. Guys, I want to hear your thought about this story in the comments section, and let me know if you were in OP's situation, what would you do? And, before you move to the final story, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to remain updated on more fantastic stories.
Now, moving on to our final story. I was working for a startup engineering firm working as a piping design engineer. But since it was a startup firm, we didn't have a lot of manpower, and the ones we had weren't as qualified either. I was one of the very few qualified enough to handle a team of my own. The boss trusted me with almost everything. I was like the second in command after the boss, only because I was managing a lot of things on the side on a volunteer basis. Things like paycheck balancing, client meetings, quality assurance, documentation, and other stuff which he should have hired someone else to do. I was good at it, and he took full advantage of it by giving me things to do that never were under my job description. One day he had this bright idea that we should revamp our website to attract more clients. And he gave this project to his nephew, who just graduated from college as a developer of sorts. After a week or so, the nephew came up with the first draft of the website, and the boss was fairly disappointed, as it didn't look anywhere near what he expected. He then called me in and asked me if I knew anything about website design. At that time I was very much interested in UI, UX, and was doing an online course to learn about it. So I told him that I'll see what I can do. I spent the next week fully making proper information architecture, wireframes, and color guidelines that the nephew could pick up and build the website from scratch. In the end, the website looked futuristic and the boss was pretty happy. But during the week my other responsibilities were put in a backlog, and it just kept piling on. I knew I would be able to cover it once I'm done with the website and didn't pay too much attention to it. The next week my boss caught up with the backlog and called me into his cabin. He started yelling at me for all the responsibilities that I didn't attend to. I calmly told him that I was working on the website, and it was not a big deal. Told him that I would clear it out as soon as possible. But he wasn't happy. He asked me why I spent so much time doing something that isn't even my responsibility. I told him that I was learning about UI, UX, and was pretty much interested to learn more. I never thought about pursuing it as a career because frankly I was a mechanical engineer by qualification and didn't think jumping to it would be easy. The boss snapped and told me that I should quit and pursue my hobby as a living. He said that only then I will understand how lucky I am to have a job that pays. I kind of got offended because 1, he doesn't even pay me the worth of things I do for the company, and 2, he knew I could cover and yet took this as an opportunity to discipline me. I stepped out of this cabin, went to my desk and put in my resignation, and went home. He called me a couple of times, asked me to revoke my resignation, and then made other people from the organization call me to convince me to come back. I wasn't having it at all. It's been 2 years now, and I decided to pursue UI, UX as a career now, and I'm working as a product designer in one of the biggest organizations in the country with a pay that's almost 300% more than what I was getting as a mechanical engineer. Update to all the people who wanted to know the company status today. The company was shut down because they had to pay a huge penalty for not being able to deliver the last project I was handling. Then COVID hit, and they had to reduce pay for all the other stuff, which led to people leaving. Eventually, the company went bankrupt for not able to keep up financially after COVID. The steps I pursued to have a career in UI, UX, I did the online certification course from Google and spent a lot of time solving whiteboard challenges, preparing myself to be a problem solver. Then I got the opportunity to intern for a service-based agency for a few months where I dedicated my time to learning as much as possible. And then when I thought I was ready, I applied to all the openings I found on LinkedIn and other job portals until I finally landed a job with this tech unicorn startup. While I was working as an intern, I also invested in a bootcamp certificate course from an organization called Design Boat in India, and also some certificate courses from Interaction Design Foundation. This concludes our video for today. I hope you've liked this petty but satisfying malicious compliance story. Guys, I want to know what you think of this story. Do you believe that OP's boss took a good decision by firing his most trusted employee? Please comment your opinion below. To stay updated on more wonderful stories, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel before you leave.